And go.
Welcome back to Dangerous Rhetoric. This is episode 94. Before I jump into it, once again, as always, remind you guys, please like, comment, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. If you want to help us keep doing this, donate. We will be happy to take your money. This is our last episode of the year, which is great. I was hoping we would hit 100 before the year was out, but it's whatever. We were very close. So, Happy New Year to all of our viewers, and we appreciate all of your support. It means a lot to us. With all of that said, today we are joined by Ryan James Girdusky. Did I say the last name right?
You did, yeah.
Okay, I was like, I hope I don't mess that up. Ryan is a New York City native. He's worked in politics for many years. He started out with New York City Councilwoman Helen Sears. He's worked on dozens of political campaigns, and he's a writer, so he's written for various sources like Fox. And he's the author of They're Not Listening: How the Elites Created the National Populist Revolution. Ryan, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, Cam and I are good friends, and I know you're friends with him as well. He was on our live stream yesterday, and he was also on one of our episodes like over a year ago. So we've become good friends, and he recommended you to me. He said, you guys got to talk to Ryan. He's really interesting. He's a lot of great political takes, and I want to see you guys have a conversation. So I was like, yes, totally down for that.
Cam said he's like, listen to a few episodes first. There was like the drag queen, and then there was a prostitute, and then there was the episodes are very wide. So this is not what you're getting on the Megyn Kelly podcast. So
it's not, no. Yeah, we try to live up to the name Dangerous Rhetoric, and that was mostly because we kept being accused of that for, opposing identity politics and the mandates and the lockdowns and that sort of stuff. People kept calling me that, like, hey, that's Dangerous Rhetoric, you can't say that. So when we started the show, I was like, that's going to be our name now. And to live up to that, we tried to definitely have a diverse array of different people come on and talk about a wide range of subjects and how they tie into culture and the culture war and politics. So, we've talked to detransitioners, we've talked to trans people, we've talked to, people in politics, scientists, artists, musicians.
Yeah, and as soon as you tell me that I can't say something, I start to really want to say it.
Yeah.
So,
or if there's a topic like, hey, you can't talk about that in this way. It's like,
really want to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely going to talk about it. But, let's jump right into it. I think the first thing I kind of wanted to go right into is this idea of populism in your book and what exactly inspired you to write this. And I guess my first question to you is, in your title, and I haven't read this yet, I'm going to get a copy and definitely delve into it.
I don't read the book. I'll tell you what it's about.
So, you said how the elites created the national populist revolution, and you kind of describe it as nationalist populism. And is there a difference between, say, normal populism, or is there one definition for what populism is, and, say, a nationalist form of populism?
Well, there's multiple types of populism. The one that I'm specifically looking at is right-wing populism in the book.
Okay.
There is left-wing populism. Bernie Sanders is a different form of populism, and populism is really an economic struggle between the elite and the working class. So the form of left-wing populism you see very oftentimes spring out of concerns over creating an egalitarian society based on the abolishment of meritocracy norms. The one that a lot of right wingers have sat there and posed, their head on is the interesting change in the working class life as far as the economy goes. But a lot of it is infused with things like securing our borders, immigration, demographic changes. And so that's the one that I am more interested in to write about, and that's what the book was about.
And it wasn't just about like politics in the United States. You also talk about Brexit.
So basically, the people who hated Trump the most. I worked for the Washington Examiner. Their underprinting regular politics when I was in 2015, 2016, and to me it was obvious that Trump would be the nominee. And I worked with alongside Bill Kristol. He worked for the Weekly Standard, which was our sister site. And he could not fathom it. And the people that I met that really could not fathom that Donald Trump was going to be the nominee were the biggest proponents of everything that made him the nominee. And it's the Hillary Clintons of the world, it's the Barack Obamas, George Bushes. And so basically I wrote an article for the American Conservative magazine, which was about how populism national populism, right-wing populism, really came about in a revived way in the late 90s to the mid 2010s. And I looked at all these major countries that had these restorations of populist figures, from Hungary in 1997 to Switzerland and Austria in 98 and 99, and then you have Denmark in 2001, and then you have France in 2002, and the Netherlands in 2002. And here's the thing, and here's the movement. It's not just in Europe; it's also in India, and it's in Japan, and it's in Brazil, and it's in Colombia, and it's over all the same issues. It's basically the same story, photoshopped and copied in different country after country. And then it happened here, and right before it happens in any place, they say, well, this is the firewall. It cannot happen in Spain. It can't happen in Portugal. Now it cannot happen in Canada or Ireland, but it always seems to. So I write about the conditions that create the explosion of populism in every place.
And what do you think those conditions are exactly?
I think, there's multiple things. So first of all is the idea of the working class not being able to move past their economic station in life. When there's permanent or feels like permanent stagnation, when national currencies are watered down in their worth, and working class feel like they are not able to exceed, it's certainly the creation of a populist movement, whether it comes to either a Bernie style one or a Trump style one, the depletion of manufacturing, the depletion of the working class model to make a decent life for yourself. And then on top of it is the erosion of national borders. Mass immigration is a huge one. And there are two types of major forces, one being outside forces and one being internal forces. Internal forces being the depletion of the economy, or the depletion of the working class economy. And then the other one would be something like, when Barack Obama says, hey, it'd be a great idea, let's overthrow Gaddafi and make Libya a democracy, and then it turns into a slave state, and 2 million people flee across Europe. That's an external change that creates a populist wave, which is what happened. That's why the Brothers of Italy and Lega became the major governing parties of Italy over the course of just a few years after being charged by a socialist government forever.
Yeah, the Libya situation was such a disaster. What a disaster that was.
That was one of Hillary Clinton's big pushes too.
Yeah, famously, there's that clip where she laughed about it, where she's like, "We came, we saw, he died," and she's all giddy.
Yeah,
and that along with Madeleine Albright, Clinton's former chief of staff, who said that there was 500,000 Iraqi children starved to death because of the Clinton-led food sanctions in Iraq, and she said it was totally worth it.
Psychopathic.
And that was what Osama bin Laden used in his declaration of war against the United States. Yeah. You're probably too young to know this stuff, but yeah, it happened.
I'm 32. Brent is 40. So we definitely remember.
Oh, okay. You're my age. You guys look a lot younger overall.
Oh, thank you. If you got closer, you'd see all the gray on my face.
The cartoon Deadpool on my T-shirt and the kitty cat on my head.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that really throws it off.
Camouflaging myself. You can't see the lines on this camera, but they're there.
It's good. It's nice that you wipe Vaseline on your camera before you start the show.
Perfect.
Yeah. No, we very much came of age during the Bush, the Bush era.
Yeah, I was at American University in 2002 to 2005, and was a frequent protester down in front of the White House during the George W. Bush reign.
And I grew up in
presidency of all time.
I grew up in
my lifetime.
I was in, Elizabeth, New Jersey is where I'm from, and that's 14 miles from Manhattan across the water. And, 9/11 and all of that stuff. I was 11 when that happened. I remember all of that quite vividly, and how things very, much shifted in the country. And although I was very young at the time and I didn't quite understand what was happening and just how impactful that was on the landscape of everything, but as I came of age, you come to realize all these
everything
changes. Everything changed, and it kind of
really it's hard to tell people. I employ people who are in their early 20s, and it's hard for them to understand. You don't understand how things changed literally overnight, and how people had, I'm from Queens my entire life. My mother worked in the World Trade Center in Tower 1 on 97th floor. She survived, but almost everyone in her office died.
Wow.
And it's hard to really understand how, it's hard to be able, I remember working in my first restaurant when I was like 16 years old. This is 2 years post on the Iraq War's just starting. And like the waitresses were like, this is in Queens and this is not the most Republican part of the country. And they were like, George Bush is doing the right thing. And we have to just support George. George Bush could do literally no wrong in those years. And I was like, and I remember being young, I was like 16. I was like, this is wrong. You guys are wrong. This is absolutely stupid. But there was no convincing them otherwise.
Yeah, there was just this heightened state of fear, and
Remember the charts? Like, is it a red day or a yellow day or an orange day?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
We literally would wake up and see the color. Like it now, always in retrospect of a crisis, do you realize how ridiculous people are? It is now, like, I am more mad about COVID now than I was when COVID was happening.
I was going to bring that up because they did something very similar with the COVID numbers and all of that stuff. Quite similar.
The fact that I had to wear a mask to walk to a table and then take it off. Yeah. Now, the fact that I ate outside literally makes me like irate at this point. And that's happened to me, which is, I'm not a student. I didn't like miss a year of my life in school or like other people did. Nothing that bad happened to me, but like that makes me irate. I ate outside in the winter for no fucking reason.
Yeah.
So
outside, inside.
I ate in a box. I ate in a box with 4 walls.
Yeah.
That was but it had no indoor heat. Yeah. So I was freezing in a box outside when there was a heated room next to me inside.
Yeah. They brought the inside outside.
Also, nobody likes to talk about how rats and mice had easy access to crumbs and were shitting and pissing all over the floors of those boxes that they built.
Dying under there.
My sister graduated during 2021, and she graduated high school, and we had our ceremony outside in the rain, in the cold. And like we're all freezing, standing in the rain, and I'm like, "What are we doing?" And then my dad was like, "They should open a tent." I said, "We should be in that building next to us.
Yes,
it's a building.
It's tuition to keep open. Yeah. This is what we should be doing right now." And like now, actually, I have to like black it out because it gets me so irate.
We have to be careful what we say on YouTube still to this day, because there are things that you are not allowed to say on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like what? I'm just joking.
No, it is crazy. The way it's just all these like seniors too were just left to die alone, and horrible, evil
frankly,
stuff.
there should be charges against Cuomo and Wolf and what was the other one? Cuomo, Wolf, and
the New Jersey governor.
The New Jersey governor, yeah.
Murphy.
Yeah. Because they all did the same thing, that they put the positive patients into nursing facilities when there were open hospital beds, because they anticipated this influx of patients that was just going to swarm the hospital system. Remember, we heard constantly about the hospitals. It's going to be overloaded. It's
also,
going to never happen.
Not letting people have funerals for their loved ones. Like George Floyd got a funeral, and all these other people couldn't even mourn their loved ones.
When we weren't allowed to go outside.
Yeah,
there was I have a lot of relatives who work in the hospital system in New York City, and New York City's hospitals are always between 90 and 97% full on any given day.
That's normal.
So it's normal. So yes, would a surge overwhelm the hospital system? Yeah, but a surge of the flu would overwhelm the hospital system because it's always 90% full. There's not that many hospitals in a city of 9 million people.
Yeah. And guess what? We get 2 surges twice a year, like clockwork, because that's how viruses work.
And also a lot of our hospitals are trauma hospitals. Most COVID deaths were like the hospital in Queens that was like ground zero for all like the body bags. I forget the name of the hospital. It's a trauma hospital. If you get stabbed, it's a great hospital to go to. If you need surgery, you should not go to that hospital. And that's the kind of hospital it is. So we were overwhelmed. And the lesson that we should have learned from COVID, if we had half of a brain as a country, which I'm giving up hope for, was, hey, America is too fucking fat of a nation.
Yep.
And we are too fat of people. And that was, aside from being old, that was the largest comorbidity.
Yes.
Was being fat.
Yes.
And like there was, and literally, like, I mean, God forgive me for saying what I'm about to say, but my friends and I, we would like be announced like young person, 29-year-old dies of COVID, and you'd be like, what do you think, 300 pounds or 400 pounds? And they were always extraordinarily overweight. And you're like, it's not that hard to guess. And the reason that red states were hurt and black communities at first were hurt larger than white ones were, they are the heaviest.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science.
Yeah, and even despite all of that, the overwhelming of the hospitals didn't really last that long. And one of the biggest signs to me very early on that what was happening was absurd, and that they kept dragging it on after this was, we had the Javits Center opened with all these beds over here in Manhattan, and they brought a cruise ship in with hundreds of more beds, hospital ship like in the Hudson. And I think it was around late April, they closed the Javits Center and that ship left. And after that, it should have been like, all right, lockdown's done, open everything up. No, they dragged it on and dragged it on and dragged it on.
Well, I say, like, listen, at the very beginning, I heard about COVID in probably early December 2019. I was on Steve Bannon's show, and Steve was the first one to say to me, Ryan, there's this virus in China. It's going to make its way to America. It really is dangerous. You need to pay attention to it, and you need to get the masks, like the important masks. This is in 2019. This is the only thing he said when you should really stock up on supplies because it's going to be a run on all the stores. And he was right. He was 100% right. And when COVID, I told my whole family about it. They all thought I was nuts, like they always do. And when COVID hit, though, I was very much prepared for what I thought was going to happen. And I give every political leader in this country grace for the first 90 days.
Right.
It's your job to protect the people. You don't know what the information is. Remember, going back to Italy, in Italy, people were dropping dead left and right. In Iran, they were dropping dead left and right. China was not releasing information about the virus. You did not know what it was. I give people grace and say, you know what, you freaked out for the first 90 days. You needed to figure something out. But once we really knew things, when Japan produced the study of how hard it was to contract COVID, that was in probably late May, early June of 2020. We really could have taken a step back and said, we don't need to do this the way we're doing it.
Yeah, we were also ahead of it a bit at that time. We knew about the virus probably around that same time in December.
I got everybody masks.
Yeah, Brent got people masks for Christmas.
The actual like kinds that have the valve outward that actually filters incoming air.
And also, as early as February, Brent, had a solo channel that got nuked off YouTube. It's gone now. But he had a solo channel, and in February, he made a video about the virus, and he was already talking about, like, guys, this looks like it was made in a lab. And this was before anyone was even saying that. And lo and behold, you're probably correct about that. So we were on that.
Well, there was a bunch of people saying the same thing at the same time. A lot of them got nuked off of YouTube for daring to say it. Yeah. I did sort of a tongue-in-cheek style, comparison to Resident Evil because there were a lot of similarities between the story that was coming out of China and then the Resident Evil thing.
Umbrella Corporation.
Well, this made no sense. Like someone ate a bat.
No sense.
And then it was a pangolin.
If that was true, Ozzy Osbourne would have had COVID 45 years ago. So it just doesn't make any sense. And was this the first person to ever ate a bat before? I don't get it.
So we got into this talking about 9/11, and one of the things that I came to realize kind of early on, and I don't know if you would agree with this or not, but I feel like the whole post 9/11 era almost set the stage for that COVID fiasco to be able to play out in the way that it played out, to have this kind of heightened hysterical sort of society that's, beholden to the government to protect them when a crisis goes down and all of that. And I don't know, what do you think?
I don't know, but I think that what happens is, and I don't know if it's an American thing, if it's a Western thing, or just a people thing, but we in America right now, especially over the last 30 years, have really chosen to always take the easy route out. So when we were having a real big problem, so after 9/11, right, the 9/11 Commission comes out with their study, which has dozens and dozens of recommendations, most of which are either not done or done half-ass. Yeah. One of which was to build a border wall honest, if no one remembers that, it's a unit barrier on the border. One of them was to sit there and to do an entry-exit system to know who's in the country illegally. One was to go after illegal aliens for misusing driver's license, all this rest of stuff. None of it happens. George Bush says, go to the mall and let's fight in a war in Iraq. He takes the most expedient route to make people feel safe rather than to make them safe. Yeah. You have after the economic downturn of 2008, labor force participation rates have never returned to what they were, and their answer is just bail out the banks. That's the solution. That's going to be that's the problem to the economy. And in COVID, you have a deeply fat nation of very obese people with a sickening food problem, what we eat, what we put in our bodies, and how little we move. And the solution is everyone wear a mask. At what point are you gonna take? I know it's uncomfortable to take the hard way and have to sacrifice your time and energy to do things to make society better. But at what point is there no more Band-Aids left in the box to cover a bullet wound?
Yeah.
And does the body just start bleeding out?
They didn't want to address, what people could actually do to heighten their immune systems and make it less likely that this virus would affect them. So go out and exercise.
And it seems obvious to anyone who has even a shred of American history that that the power you give to the government can always be used against you. And that is the post 9/11 intelligence state is used against Americans each and every single solitary day of our lives. Yeah. I mean, that's what Snowden showed, but we all kind of knew it before Snowden, but we definitely knew it after Snowden, and it's endemic of our system right now. I mean, it's a very, very sick thing, and the problem is half of the country really roots for it to be that way.
Yeah.
Well, probably more like 20 to 25% of the country.
It created a sort of culture of fear, I would say.
I think people like to be moralistic, and I think people like to feel like they have an edge on somebody. So that COVID was a great social experiment in like being like a kid in school when you got to be the teacher's pet by ratting on other kids, and like it became like people got off on the idea of telling somebody that they were not wearing a mask.
Why are you wearing a mask? I can't tell you how many times I was walking my dog outside in 70-degree weather, and some Karen or some old person would snipe at me. Oh, you should really be wearing a mask. Oh, where's your mask? And
I didn't get too much of that, but I did get a lot of death stares from
one time a guy yelled at me while he was smoking a cigarette saying, "Wear a fucking mask." And I was like, sir. There was one time I was driving home from Massachusetts, and I'm driving. I had to get off the highway because it was too backed up. So I'm driving to the side streets of some godforsaken town in Connecticut, and there was this overweight black lady drinking an energy drink and smoking a cigarette while wearing a mask. And I was like, this is why I have given up all hope.
We are living in clown world. It's clown world. Yeah. I mean, we're just we've crossed the portal, and we are now in parody world where it's very hard to distinguish parody from reality, as Libs of TikTok regularly shows us all.
No, it's true. I have a relative, and she has a doctorate, and she's considered the smartest person in my family because she has this retarded degree, and she got COVID. Everything she said was always wrong when she said it. And I remember when I said it was my whole family, I was like, in December 19, I was like, guys, there's this virus, we should wear a mask. She's like, you're ridiculous, you're a moron, we're not gonna wear a mask, yada, yada, yada. Okay, fine. COVID hits, and she goes, it's gonna pass by in a couple of weeks, don't worry about it. I was like, no, this is going on forever. Then, as we got more information, she was masking up even more. And then she would tell me, oh, yeah, Cuomo was right for saying them inside the nursing home. So where else would they send them? I go, why are you wrong all the time?
Why are you wrong all the time?
How is it you manage to be wrong 100% of the time? It's almost a skill.
It's not even just like that she's wrong. It's that she's also wrong 180 degrees opposite direction of the truth. Like, you could find the truth by just reversing what she was saying.
Yeah. Literally in real time, you could know how the situation was changing by what she said being the opposite. It literally, you could get, a monkey could pick it out more often the truth and what was going on. And she's just a well-informed white liberal quote unquote, whatever, but awful as they call them. And she's just wrong 100% of the time. And it's like almost astounding.
Too much New York Times and NPR.
I read the New York Times, and I listen to NPR, and I still can sit there and siphon through the bullshit and be like, well, that's not.
But see, you're siphoning. That's that active step there. You're parsing. A lot of people are just like,
she's gonna see this now.
It in and
she's gonna
presuming
be like,
it's 100%.
I guarantee you, she will never listen to anything that I ever do.
Well, she's gonna see this and be like, Ryan, I saw what you said about me.
Doubtful.
She knows. We have a decent relationship, but it is very. We were on one Thanksgiving. I mean, I don't care. This is a funny story, so I don't care saying it. We were on a group text, and I didn't know. I thought I was just texting my brother. I didn't know I was texting like more people in my family than just my brother. And he sent a photo of a few of my cousins and myself. And I said, "Oh my God, my cousin, the one we're talking about, got so fat in the last year." And she was on the message, and she was like, "Really?" I was like, I can't take it back. I didn't say it. So I was just like, well, it's only been a year. You could lose the weight. So that's our relationship. She forgave me, but you just have to eat shit and say, yep, I said it. Yep. And then we were at Thanksgiving, and I got sat on a wobbly chair, and my chair broke after I called her fat, so it all worked out.
Beautiful.
This is a good lead into something else I wanted to bring up. And, I was watching today, actually, I was watching the discussion you had with Michael Malice on his channel, which was a really good talk. And, you were talking about Trump and some of the reasons that he won as a sort of populist candidate. And one of the things you brought up was, this sort of don't give a shit kind of attitude that he had about everything he said and did, and people would give him flack for it. And he was just like, yeah, well, I said it. And do you think that really is one of the main reasons that people just rush to the polls to vote for this guy? Because I personally do. I think, the more people were told oh, well, he's awful, you can't vote for that guy, he says all these horrible things, and I think a lot of people were just fed up with the establishment side of it. They looked at people like Hillary and they were just like, I don't want more of that. I think I would rather have this guy over here who, even though he's a little abrasive and harsh, he at least sounds like he really means what he says and he's unapologetic about it.
I think that, part of it is the fact that he's Donald Trump. So, I could say some of the things that he said and get away with them. Most politicians can't, although I think that they thought that they can, and that's why they walked out the last 4 years like morons. But I think part of it, but it would not have been the same had he... So for every time he said John McCain wasn't a war hero or whatever, he was, I prefer my, things that you're just like, oh my God, why the fuck would you even bring that up for? Every time he did that, he said things that were obvious truths that no one dared to say. So when he gets into the South Carolina Republican debate and he tells Jeb Bush, your brother was a disaster, the Iraq war was a disaster, in a room that now seems very obvious, but at the time in 2015 when he said that in South Carolina, a room full of veterans, it seemed like that was going to be the end of his entire political career. How could you say that? Something that was so obviously true.
Yeah.
That no one had the guts to say. When he sat there and he said, we can't cut Social Security from poor older people. That's all they have. When he said we can't sit there and do we have to have a healthcare system that takes care of people. When he said let gay people use whatever bathroom they want, or trans people use whatever bathroom, an adult use whatever bathroom they want to use in my building. Things that, or he said I'm okay with gay marriage, which he was the first person, and he had Peter Thiel speak as an openly gay man at the Republican National Convention. It seemed something that, in 2015, you could not possibly do, and he did it. And for every time that he did those things, people who were not particularly religious, more center than center right, especially in economics, sat there and said, yeah, the people in control of the government, they're fucking you over 6 days from Sunday. Yes, we got raw deal after raw deal. They forgave him for the, oh my God, I can't believe he said, John McCain wasn't a hero, because he was saying obvious truths that they connected to. Yeah. And I think that's the important thing. The problem now is that a lot of Republican politicians, what they learned from Trump was, oh, I can act like an asshole on Twitter and still get elected. Not, oh, there are millions of people, white working class people in particular, who vote for me constantly, who feel screwed over, and I should speak to their interests more often. That was the lesson they should have learned, not the lesson that they did learn.
Yeah, so I guess that's actually a good lead into another thing I wanted to bring up from that Michael Malice discussion you had. You mentioned having lunch with Marjorie Taylor Greene a couple years ago. And
love Marjorie.
Yeah, she's a very interesting person.
She like shoots from the hip. She says what she thinks, and she doesn't apologize.
Definitely shoots from the hip. That's for sure. Pisses a lot of people off. But you asked her a question during that lunch. I think it was something along the lines of, what do you think is the biggest problem in the country today?
Yeah.
And, do you want to talk about her response and what she said?
Because I got to meet Marjorie when she had been elected but not seated, because she won her first election was a special, I think, and she had not been seated yet as a member of Congress, which she was going to be. And this is when the controversies were starting to build about her with the Jewish space lasers and all the rest of it. And so I said to her, I wanted to get a feel of her, and I was interested in trying to help set up her office and whatnot. And she had these people from Georgia who were there, the group of the dumbest white men in America, and I was like, oh God, this poor one is screwed beyond belief. And I just said to her, I like Marjorie. Marjorie knows me well. She knows I'm a straight shooter. I don't screw around. I'm not sitting here to sit there and fluff anybody. And I was like, are you, I said, what's the biggest issue facing the country? And she said the fact that working class people are portrayed like losers in the media and they're made to feel like shit. Yeah. She said it's always the plumber who's the fat guy with his ass crack hanging out, and the guy working in the office who's got 3 college degrees, who's slender and thin and smart and beautiful. And she was, and oftentimes that's not the way the real world is, but they're made to feel like shit all the time. And I thought that, I was like, okay, this woman gets it on an instinctual level. On an instinctual level, she understands what the problem is. Now, is she great at always saying it out loud? And is she always, the most well-spoken person in the world? No. But she gets it on. And there's 2 ways I find most politicians understand what way the world is. It's either learned. People like Marco Rubio after the 2016 election has learned about certain issues facing the working class, and to his credit, he's done a lot of very good things since then, like expanding the child tax credit and trying to sit there and get maternity leave for working class women through Social Security, whatever. He's learned it. And then there's people who just get it, and she just gets it on an instinctual level. So I credit her for that.
Yeah, no, and I think her response is kind of spot on too. I think that it's true. I think the working class people do feel I don't want to say disenfranchised, but they feel not valued anymore.
No, absolutely, you're right. Yeah,
and these are totally right. These are the people who keep society running. You can have a fancy degree from a university and sit there and wax poetic about politics all day long, but at the end of the day, you need someone to turn your electricity on. Sometimes you need someone to fix something in your house, and it's just and
it speaks to the volume that we're in our country right now. We have the worst labor force participation rate we've had since the Great Depression. I think it's at 61 or 62% or something like that. You have millions of people, specifically men, who have just dropped out of society. There are millions of men who do not work and do not go to school, that are of working age, and they're not disabled, and they're not getting married, they're not having children. They have dropped out. They do not feel that they are invested in a society that constantly tells them the future is diverse. You have to be a girl boss. You have to be,
future is female.
Future's female. It's a multiracial future. White men need not apply. I'm not saying it's all white men who have been dropping out of society, but there are a lot who have. And it's
incredibly disenfranchising.
Yeah, they don't vote that often, and it is very problematic when you have millions of people who don't feel invested not only in their own future but in the national future. And I don't know really where you take that or where you go from it, but it's not even being discussed as a problem by most people. Some people have sat there and said some stuff, and I'm always now interested because I'm a consultant for my day job. So I'm interested in finding candidates who do want to ask those questions, who do want to at least explore those things, because I think that's the most important conversation I have.
That's a pretty good lead in. I wanted to ask you about the fracturing that we're seeing in the Republican Party.
Well, before that, I was going to just ask another quick question. Do you think the lockdowns contributed a lot to instilling that mentality into people. Once they just pushed everyone into their homes for this long period of time, how many people just simply gave up on even going back into the workforce, or maybe they found no more meaning in whatever it is they were doing beforehand. They felt disposable, that sort of thing.
Well, I think, well, if you look at the labor force participation, right, the major thing that happens, the first thing is the crisis in 2008. That was the first thing that saw a huge drop of people who never came back to the labor force. And I think the bigger thing, what happened with COVID, was the restructuring of the economy. Now, remember, for most of our national history, especially our post-World War II national history, the biggest driver of employment is small business. When you have a choice by the largest states in the country to shut down every small business while Amazon can function and while Google can function and all these other major corporations can function, what's going to happen? They're going to close. And so the small business driver, I'm a small business owner. I don't employ many people, but I employ quite a few, a decent amount. It is, it's a huge driver for those people to sit there and get those jobs. And I mean, mine is all telecommunication basically, but if you work at a deli or a restaurant or a small manufacturing company, you produce cardboard boxes, you produce chairs, you produce whatever restaurant equipment, and you just can't function, then where do you go? You cannot make up those losses. If you're a barber, I remember my barber had to increase prices, and he said to me when he reopened finally after COVID, he said, because everyone had like the most whacked out haircuts from in New York, and couldn't get a haircut. I look like a freaking Italian Zulu. And,
I cut mine myself.
I didn't cut it. I was like, I'll just grow it out, and my hair grows up. I mean, I literally look like a sideshow Bob. And so I said, he goes 2 more weeks and we would have just closed forever. He's like, we would never been able to open up again.
And a lot of places did. I'm still taken aback when I walk around all the neighborhoods in Manhattan and stuff. I would say 1 out of 4 maybe places are still closed.
All my favorite
for
places,
lease, just empty.
All my favorite places that I always loved are just gone. And the biggest irony, which I have a little bit of schadenfreude for the whole thing, is that for 20 years since Giuliani's New York, real estate developers and landlords did everything they could to kick out small businesses so they can get a pharmacy, they can get a CVS, they can get a Starbucks, they can increase the rents and get one of these, commercial franchises in their businesses. And now with between the crime and COVID lockdowns, all those stores are closing now too. Yep. And they would have killed to have a mom and pop business from 20 years ago still operating in their store. So, I mean, that's the big shot for it. But yeah, New York will never be back to where it was in any way.
Not anytime soon.
It's just, I just don't think it's possible because people just move on. The first 2 months of the lockdown, I'm not going to lie, I kind of enjoyed, because you're like, I don't have to be anywhere. No one's gonna be anywhere. Everyone can leave me the hell alone. And then afterwards, you're like, when is this gonna end?
Yeah,
this
isn't normal.
This is not normal, and that's how people turn to alcoholism.
Yeah.
People went through abuse, a lot of drug abuses. So I'm sure all of those things contributed back to your question as to why people fell apart. But it was a massive restructuring of the economy in a fundamental way that I don't think people understand as of yet, where you literally had most people have their, outside of getting stimulus checks to pay their bills, most people lost a lot of money, and the richest 500 people in the country got profoundly wealthy.
Yeah, it was basically like the hugest wealth transfer in our modern history.
Probably close to it.
Yeah, very early on, Brett and I were like, guys, I don't think you understand what the repercussions of this are going to be, and they're going to reverberate through this country, especially through the cities, for years.
I don't think we've even seen the full, expression of the consequences yet. We're still grappling with, problems with kids and development. We're watching the economy sort of slowly, implode. What's going to happen over the next 18 months is going to be huge, and especially along with the conflict in Ukraine, which is definitely messing with supply lines. Ukraine used to be a huge exporter of grain and breadbasket stuff. Now that's not going to happen, so it's going to drive the prices up, across Europe, which is going to drive the prices up here because everything's so interconnected thanks to globalism. It's like we still don't know what's going to happen as a result.
Well, I think the biggest irony is that Trump sat there and when he ran in 2016 said it is a problem we don't produce in this country, and in 2020 it was proven true. Everything he said was true, and he was not able to sit there and connect those dots and say, "Guys, I was right. Now you have to listen to what I'm saying." And it's a problem that we had some people coming in our country who were literally bringing in COVID. And God knows what other diseases. But I think that there is a change now. I mean, certainly semiconductors are being brought into this country a little bit more than they used to be. But when I say we really need a series of leaders who have kind of a larger meta opinion about the way the world is structured. We passed this $1 trillion infrastructure package. Let's say there's only $200 billion for real infrastructure, whatever the case is. Passed this massive infrastructure package. At no point did a leader or did several leaders sit there and say, even on the left or the right, say, hey, let's look at the way the country is. Let's look at all the cities and all the towns and all the states that have been decimated because of opening trade relations with China. Let's invest in our infrastructure program in those areas so some of the jobs that will come back, where we're pushing to come back to those places. Otherwise, they're all going to Arizona, Texas, California, North Carolina, Florida. And the whole entire repatriation program that we're looking to do at this point, there's actual real conversations going over those. They're not going back to Detroit or Ohio or Cleveland or, the Shenandoah Valley or not Shenandoah, but like Western Virginia or Pennsylvania. Those jobs are still not going to be there when they push for them. So that is the one thing that I think on a meta level, you sit there and you hope for a leader that says, how am I going to really profoundly make the lives of people better? We have a tremendous debt and deficit problem, but all spending is not bad spending. And if you're going to invest in people, make sure it's to sit there and improve their lives on an overall basis.
Yeah, Thomas Massey recently had a huge. Love Thomas Massey.
He ran his first super PAC.
He's cool. Yeah. I'm a big fan. And one of the things that he recently dropped on Twitter was this huge blast for Republican traders, Democrats, and the president over the trillions of dollars in the omnibus, and specifically the $100 billion plus that we've spent in Ukraine. And he, sort of elaborated that, from every district, every congressional district in the country, that would be about $200 million. And he was like, imagine what your district could do with a $200 million investment.
Think of it like this. There's 100,000 Russians who have been killed and wounded, and we spent $100 billion. That's $1 million per Russian.
Wow.
I mean, it obviously doesn't equal out to the same amount in the United States, but let's say we could have spent $300,000 per American on investment in something, I don't know, job training or healthcare or losing weight programs, whatever the case may be.
Saving your business,
The biggest irony, and I tweeted this, I said, this is not money we are giving to Ukraine. This is money we are either printing or borrowing from China to give to Ukraine to fight Russia, who is allied with China.
Right.
It's endless series of the dopiest things in the world. And I talked to one of my friends works from Mitch McConnell. And he said to me, the Republicans in the Senate, they've gotten a lot of things. They've learned a lot from Trump, but they still can't get past the foreign policy stuff. They're still war hawks. And I was at, oh God, we are so screwed as a country. I was at a meeting, and it's all these Republican business types. And I don't even know how I get invited to some things. Well, Ann Coulter invited me as her +1. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten invited. And she, and I'm just yelling at people. And I'm completely someone said in a room full of people who disagree, you really shine. But I'm yelling at people. And and I said, we really have to worry about the people who've been saying, I think part of the reason they lost in 2022 was saying we want to cut Social Security. I go, people are really struggling, especially those on a fixed income, and that's all they have is that Social Security check. You can't take it from them, and that's what they perceive it as, whether you're going to say it's like that or not. That's what they perceive it as. And this guy was like, we are the party that won elections on ending Social Security. I'm like, what elections did you win? Like,
since
in
when?
what world did you win these elections? Are you delusional?
I guess this is a good lead into what you were going to ask.
Well, yeah, it was like, it seems like there is a fracturing in the Republican Party. There's the new guard, the populist wing, the MAGA Republicans, though I hesitate to call them that. And they are definitely the party that's sort of taking up the cause of the working class and sort of, being like the fiscal, true fiscal conservatives in the sense of wanting to end wars and, giving endless billions to Ukraine.
Yeah.
So do you think that we're going to see that? What do you think is going to happen here? Like, can you see that faction growing to really take over the party, or do you think we're going to see like an ongoing struggle over the next 2 years?
The big problem is that they lost so many of the races in 2022, and because Trump is the identified personality, he's done such a terrible job at endorsing candidates in 2022. It's going to be a perceived backlash as like, oh, this person's too populist, they can't win. I mean, we only won a few seats last election, and like JD Vance, who I worked for his super PAC as well, was one of the very few that actually won. So I think that there's a big backlash against populists. But the thing is that it's not that we have to get these perfect candidates who agree with us 100% of the time to win every election. It's that because you're not going to win everybody, you have to convert a lot of people to your causes. And it's that people have to the overall perception. The number of Republicans, for example, that disapprove of Ukraine is far higher than the numbers who ever disapproved of like the ongoing wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. The number of people who support amnesty is far lower than it was 10 years ago. The people who talk about like trade deficits and building supply chains or whatever, that has increased substantially. So it's going in the right direction overall. I think leadership is really not there. And you have to really find these people who have kind of the foresight and the vision to get things right. I think the reason that Republicans have been clamoring towards Ron DeSantis is not that he is the man with all the perfect plans. He's the man with the only plans.
Yeah,
so you're like, oh, wow.
Had a lot of wins.
You have a lot of wins, but you are somebody who seems efficient at doing things like building bridges and keeping schools open, and you're not backing down, and you seem to have some vision for the way Florida is supposed to be as a state. And I'm not saying everything in Florida is perfect. I'm not saying that there's not room to improve. I'm not saying that he's my person we should support in 2024. But a little foresight, a little idea, aside from tax cuts, goes a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see a larger scale sort of, conservative vision for the country, 20 years in the future laid out by the RNC. But the RNC seems like a bunch of old, impotent geezers that are too busy counting their money in order to actually be, considerate of the rest of the country.
The RNC's main job is to raise money. So I don't fault them. But you sit there and you say, if I was the governor of Texas, so everyone in Texas is celebrating the fact that so many people are moving to Texas. And I'm not moving to Texas, but like one thing I hear from Texans is, well, I can't afford to live here anymore. Or the endless urban sprawl that they have, which has made like a giant, 100-mile long suburb of, Dallas and Houston. Those are not, is that the only idea that your economy is going to grow? Is your economy going to grow because you have, so many places are offering fast food and because everyone can live in a suburb? And what are you doing to make sure that native Texans aren't being pushed out? Same thing Florida's got to ask, is they sit there and say, how do I make sure our native kids, same that Mayor Giuliani and New Yorkers should have asked 20 years ago, how do we make sure that native New Yorkers can afford to live in this place if they want to stay here? And they can't.
Yeah, a lot of people left the city, and it started in 2020, and then there was a huge surge in 2021. And what's interesting too is like the last time we did the census, like that's not even going to be accurate anymore.
No, not at all. No, the new census numbers came out. We've already seen like 250,000 people leave New York.
Yeah.
It's there are moments that you sit there and you say to yourself, it is unbearable. Like, why do I don't have to live like this? And then I go to other parts of the world and say, I'd rather live like this. But you know, I've been to the Midwest. But you sit there and you say, I don't have to live like this. And, you know, if you really had a sensible, smart mayor of like Philadelphia, for example, and a sensibly smart governor, oh my God, Philadelphia is a beautiful city. It has a lot of the same architecture. It has a lot of the same art scenes. If they didn't have crime like they do now, and they like had open schools and stuff like that, oh my God, New Yorkers would be moving there like gangbusters. You know what I mean? Like a city like that, or a city like, you know, Chicago, but all these major cities are unlivable in large senses of the word, or they're not preferable from one unlivable place to the other. So, I mean, the opportunity is so much there, especially for younger people who don't want to live. I don't want to live in a suburb. I'd rather hang myself. But like, you know, some people do. And but if you don't want to live in a suburb, if you want to live in a place where things are happening, you want to live in a city, then, you know, you don't have many options. And New York is lucky that we had 2 decades of mayors who at least got crime correctly. So it was safe to live here, though it was expensive. Now it's not safe, expensive, and police can't do their job, and the business are closed.
Yep, and there's not that much to do anymore either.
Yeah, I mean, there's still some stuff to do, but for a while you couldn't do any of those things unless you injected
it's
yourself.
Always, well, you live here like I live here, so it's funny because I have friends who visit from out of town. They're like, what's there to do in New York? I'm like, how the hell am I supposed to know? I stay in my apartment and I watch Hulu like everyone else does. I have no idea.
It's like working or watching
things to do in New York like an asshole, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know we did that. I didn't know I could do that. I'm like, I should go out every once in a while. But like, you know, I have museums that I ignore like everyone else does.
I don't. I definitely make a point to hit up the museums and the bookshops. And
I went to COVID to a museum.
There was a really cool, was that Barbara Kruger who did the Orwell thing in MoMA?
Yeah, but you know, I love the Met. I think the Metropolitan Museum is one of the greatest places.
And I went to the Grant Wood, and those are my last 2. I don't know what years they were at this point, but like, I won't wear a mask. Like
no. Well, you don't have to anymore over there, but for a while, yes, like people like us, not just over the mask thing, but for refusing a particular medical intervention. We're literally
transgender surgery.
Yeah, yes, that one. We're literally segregated from these places, and to be segregated from museums is particularly damning to me, because it's like, this is literally our collective cultural heritage, and you're saying I'm not allowed to go in there because I haven't had a particular experimental medical intervention.
Or on all the subways and buses.
Yes,
I mean,
or restaurants. Even like we couldn't go to restaurants, so it's just like that was one of the reasons too that
people who are still obsessed with masks are the most bizarre human beings. No, I was at a
total weirdos.
I mean, I get, my grandma's at a nursing home. I get why they still wear masks in nursing homes. I do. I don't, whatever. But like, it's a nursing home, so it's a specific place. But what'd you say?
I don't get it. Like, it's just a placebo. It doesn't actually do what they do.
Whatever. I get why they want to do. Like, want to have less, even for like the flu or whatever. These are people in their 80s and 90s or whatever, and
they might have trouble covering their mouth. Yeah.
Whatever. Okay, you're walking from one room to. I get it. All right. So fine, but I get that for a nursing home why you would want to wear a mask. But I went to the skin doctor the other day to get the cancer exam thing, and he's literally on my body as close as you could possibly get, and he's like making me wear a mask. I'm like, you know, this is not doing shit, right? Like, do I have to do? And I have a big nose on top of it. I'd like Asians. It must be as easy when you have like a smaller nose to wear a mask. It's not easy for me.
I got that Roman pointy thing going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's not meant for somebody who looks like an obese Jew and like myself. And so this is.
You are not obese. Stop.
Well, I mean, trust me. I got the right camera angle. Right?
I got the right camera angle.
I look like John Ossoff if he had diabetes.
So, you know, we were talking about the migrations of people leaving places like New York and going to, you know, Texas and Florida and stuff like that, and how much the economic situation has to do with that and the crime. But what really led to the economic situation is the lockdowns, right? And the mandates. It's this masking thing we're talking about.
It's also contributed to the crime.
It's, you're going to take this. The school closure. So like, you're going to take this injection or we're going to push you out of society. And granted, they lifted all of that stuff, but by the time they lifted that stuff, it was too late. So many people were fed up with it that they did just leave. And they're like, screw it. I'm going to go somewhere that's open and free, that isn't going to pester me over what I put on my face or what I put into my body that I don't want in there.
Well, we can sanctimonious. You were a good person. It was like being in World War II and fighting the war effort.
Yes,
it was.
It was.
You were keeping your. You were recycling your metal.
Do your part
to make. Yeah, you were doing your part. And it's like, it's insane, as if it was going to go away forever.
Yeah.
And I'm not a science person. I only took earth science. So I was like, oh yeah, so we all stay inside, I'll go away in 2 weeks. And then after a while, I'm like, oh wait, that doesn't make any sense. Because then everything would go away. To get rid of everything.
It's just hubris, to think that we're going to get to zero COVID, that we're going to stop a virus from spreading, or that a piece of cloth on your face is actually going to do that. It's just idiocy.
I have to wonder.
The conversation changed. I get why you don't want to overwhelm the hospitals. I get why you sit there and say, hey, this is something we don't understand and it's brand new and we don't want to overwhelm the hospitals. That's understand. I get that. I am going to be, I'm talking me in 2020. I'm going to be an active participant to make sure our hospitals overwhelmed. But then the conversation changed no longer to we're going to overwhelm the hospitals to we're going to stop the virus overall. How? How are you going to stop the virus overall? How does this happen? And it's this insane thing. It's like, people who signed up for the BLM shit and they were like, we don't want unarmed people being killed by the cops. And then it was like, we're going to take property from white people. When did this happen?
All right. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a great segue into the last topic that I wanted to talk about with you. And it's one that I know you're passionate about. And Cam said, it's something you know a lot about, how to define it and talk about this issue very articulately. And it's critical race theory.
Yeah.
This is a very controversial subject in the country right now. We've discussed it on the show a few times before, although it's been a while that we've talked about it. So you helped found the 1776.
I did found it.
You found it.
Yeah.
The 1776 Project PAC. And this was designed as, I guess, a counter to the 1619 project,
yes.
Correct?
Thank you for understanding that, because most people don't.
They don't, and a lot of people don't even know what the 1619.
That's why I love it.
is.
I thought it was such a perfect counter because 1619, 77, it's the same.
Yeah. So talk a bit about this. Maybe first describe what is CRT, because we have to define it. A lot of people have all these conflicting definitions, like, oh, it's just teaching American history, or it's not in schools, it's something that's in law schools. Yet at the same time, they're saying, why do you want to get it out of schools? They can't even be clear on that. And what is the 1619 project? How does that relate to CRT? And then describe why you decided to create this as a counter to that.
Yeah, so I started the organization in 2020 because my God, one of the good things that happened out of COVID was that people got to see what their kids were learning in schools.
Yeah.
And because everyone was going to school at home. My godson, who at the time was 10, was one of them, and he's in his class. I think it was third or fourth grade, or whatever the case may be. And his teacher starts reading a book called Race Cars, which is about a white privilege for middle schoolers. And so he and I live in a very working class area. A lot of cops. Sorry, my dog is so moved. A lot of cops are in the neighborhood, and so he was asking questions of what do you mean cops are following black cars, not white cars, or whatever the case might be. And so he was curious, and the teacher was going on an anti-police rant, and my aunt overheard it, and she went ballistic, absolutely ballistic, as did a lot of other parents. And they called the counselor, and they called the principal, and they called me. A few of them called me, including my relative, and they said, what do we do? And I did not know how bad the problem was. And upon research, it was far worse than I thought it had been. The Loudoun County schools were blowing up at the time. And I said, what can I do? I could make a PAC about school board elections and try to do something, because it's all I do. I've worked in politics since I was 19 years old. Only other job I ever had was Victoria's Secret. So I can do something with elections. So I started this PAC for school board elections, and we've helped flip over 102 school board and state superintendent races across the country. And it's to combat the rise of critical race theory. And critical race theory was founded in the 60s. There's a few founders. I think I cite on the website one of the works of one of the founders. But it is a specifically political ideology. It says explicitly, if you read Richard Delgado, and his book is called An Introduction to Critical Race Theory by NYU Press, it is specifically a political doctrine to sit there and to make race the cornerstone in the center of our governing body, and to reassess and realign our politics and our economy based on race. It is not to make sure Black people feel more identified in history lessons. It's not to teach, more alternative versions of history. It's specifically political. And the people who have used critical race theory to build upon their own platforms, like the Ibram Kendis of the world, for example, it is specifically politically conscious. That's why Ibram Kendi wanted to create a fourth branch of the government called the Department of Equity, where it would supersede the other three branches and, make laws illegal if it didn't counter equity in it. And really what it has done is it has done things like it's attacked meritocracy, where, like a school in Virginia did not give academic awards because there wasn't enough diversity this year to substantiate the academic reward.
Ridiculous.
It's so insane. Some schools punish people differently based on race. They give out suspensions to make them equitable. Some schools do. There's soft segregation in a lot of schools now, where they have after-school programs that are BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color only.
So, would you say that like affirmative action policies are like an early form of this?
Yeah, I mean, affirmative action policies, if you go back to like the 1970s and when they were talking about affirmative action, the goal was this will only be used for the next 25 or 30 years maximum, because if we just give this little boost to Black people over the course of the next 30 years, everything will be equitable. And Lyndon Johnson, in his defense of affirmative action, said if there's a certain population of, I don't have the exact quote, but the essential thing was, well, there's a certain population of people that are suffering, and they are doing, and bad things are happening to them. Who is at fault? It must be, therefore, the government that is doing that. I mean, and that in itself means that every kind of fault of a society, therefore, there's no personal responsibility or no in-group responsibility for that.
Yeah. Have you ever read the book The Diversity Delusion by Heather McDonald?
No, but I'm a big fan of Heather McDonald.
This was a very good book I read a couple years ago, and it definitely opened my eyes more to this subject and just how much these affirmative action policies have affected the culture, the school system, and just how they've failed. She very much addresses how and where they failed. We're not addressing the root problems. Like, we're just funneling all these students into schools, to meet certain quotas, to make universities look more diverse. So on the surface, it looks great, but Black and Latino students, it's not affecting how many of them drop out and actually graduate.
But it's also, I mean, listen, I didn't do well in school. I was not a good student ever at any point in my life. But I did not sit there and have I wasn't contemptuous of people that were good students.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk, but I'm happy I live in a world with a Steve Jobs and an Elon Musk. And I think that I say to myself all the time, are we doing anything in our society that China would do? Would China ever sit there and say, there's not enough, Vietnamese going to the top 1% of schools, so let's destroy the way we do things to make sure it's more racially diverse or ethnically diverse? It's totally insane, and that's why it isn't. But the thing is, the scary part of the critical race theory conversation is it's moved from soft segregation in after-school programs to genuine promotion of racism, of anti-Asian and anti-white racism by the government, by Joe Biden's government. Joe Biden specifically was giving out farm aid based on race.
Right.
He was saying the 2% of farmers who are black were going to get a higher percentage. Talk about COVID. The Republican governors of Vermont and Utah, and I'm sure there's several Democrat ones, they were saying you can get a COVID vaccine only if you are a minority first. They were specifically doing healthcare intervention based on your race. That is completely and totally insane that this is happening in this country.
It's also unconstitutional, right?
Yeah, it's also ironic because the majority of people in places like, say, New York City who rejected getting the shot
Civil Rights Act
were Black and Latino people.
And there's no black people in Vermont or Utah.
Yeah.
There's three.
There's 3.
Go knock on their door. Say, Steve, do you want a vaccine? Like, that's it. Like, there are no but it is the total sanctimonious, like, ideology of these awfuls and the male versions of these awfuls. But it is that they have a very strong foothold in government, and it seems like oh, why wouldn't you be okay with doing X, Y, or Z? Because these people have been discriminated against. When you imagine a world that's not true, and so yes, the 1619 Project. The 1619 Project was this re-envision of history that to give more focus on the Black experience when Blacks came to this country in 1619. Okay, so part of their thing that they said was that the American Revolution was fought over slavery. Not true. That slave trade was the modern way of building economies. Not true. That capitalism was only used to sit there and promote slave trade. Not true. There was things that were completely false, and before you knew it, 1,400 schools were using the 1619 Project as a method to sit there and teach kids.
Yeah. I have another good book recommendation. It's called The 1619 Project, A Critique by Philip W. Magnus.
Okay.
Yeah, very good book. It's basically a collection of essays about, where that came from and addressing those points that you brought up with historical data, like disproving them. Like, here's why this is wrong. Here's why the American Revolution was not fought over slavery, et cetera, et cetera. Very good book. It's pretty short. It's an easy read, but I recommend that people check it out.
Who's the author?
Yeah.
Philip Magnus. Yeah.
I think I know that name.
But yeah, it's like their whole argument is that like that was the original founding of the country, and that the whole basis and foundation of
horse hockey,
everything that makes
America
America is racism, is oppression. And it's like, yes, we know that those things were there, but that's not the totality of the foundation and the values.
But it's also not but to deny that to make the idea that conquest, that the destruction of human capital, the destruction of life, whatever, is unique to being Western, to being American, or to being white is idiotic.
Yeah.
It's not. It's in every culture. For some reason, everyone, everywhere around the world said, oh, wouldn't it be great to figure out a form of government, figure out a religion, and then own another person? Like, those are 3 things that everyone did across the entire world independently of each other. And had no communications of each other and just did on their own. And so it is a human nature thing. Human beings, if you live in New York, human beings are trash. Like, they are. They're not nice people most of the time. So, like, they're garbage. Like, that's why people prefer dogs over people. That's true. And we've been garbage to each other over a long period of time. So yes, all those things existed and they were not good, and we went over and above to make things better and to change the way we are. We have discrimination laws, and we have even when you did affirmative action for several decades, and whatever the case may be. But that does not mean, therefore, that the next because things are not changing. If things are not changing, there are deeper structural problems with maybe the communities we are addressing, rather than the systems as a whole. No one said, hey, let's make a white supremacist culture, but let's make sure Asians can exceed whites, or certain immigrant populations from Africa and the Caribbean. There's clearly not a problem if Nigerians are doing so well, or
Indian Americans, or Chinese Americans.
There's not a problem with the system. Maybe there's a problem with foundational Black Americans who are the descendants of slaves. Maybe there's some issue with this population that needs to be addressed. I don't know, rampant fatherlessness, rampant welfare dependency, but if you read like the writings of W.B. Du Bois and newly freed slaves of the 1860s, 1870s, they constantly say, "Give us a chance, don't make me a victim."
Yeah.
And the mentality is completely different today. And so there is something that and if you look even at Black poverty over the course of the 20th century, it plummets until LBJ's Great Society, and then it stagnates, and that kind of thing happens over and over and over again.
Yeah, well, Thomas Sowell called it was it the oppression of low expectations. I think that was the phrase he used. And we've spoken. I don't know if you know Adam B. Coleman.
Yes.
Yeah, we've had him on the show twice. Great guy, really brilliant, and he wrote a book all about this stuff from Black victim to Black victor. Like,
oh my God,
stop.
You one more book.
I love books. Come on.
I know, but you don't have to put them in the description. I do.
Stop coddling. Stop coddling minorities. Stop treating us like we're fragile little babies who can't do anything for us.
I was in Vermont one time with my friend Rob Smith, who's a Fox guy. He's black, a gay Black guy, and we're in Vermont and we're talking. We're in line to go to a restaurant, and Vermont is like the home. I love Vermont as a state, but it is the home of every white liberal retard in the world.
Oh yeah.
And and we're online at this restaurant, and we're just talking about Obama's policy in some way, and he just says the word Obama, and this white liberal woman turns around and goes, "Obama, yeah," and gives him a high five, and he was like, I was like, what the hell just happened? And he goes, all the time.
That's so embarrassing.
He's like, literally all the time. He's like, we are not people, we are their pets.
That is, wow. So that is embarrassing.
It was the first time I ever saw that since like college, where I saw a white liberal being like embarrassingly crazy.
It reminds me of that scene in Get Out where the guy's like, "Oh, we have voted for Obama twice."
Yeah, the girlfriend's father. Yep. Yeah, reminded me of that too. So another thing I want to talk about with the 1619 Project is like, we're talking about how one of the arguments they're making is that it's at the very foundation of America, racism, all this stuff. What they're also arguing is that the very foundation of capitalism is racist, and that's a huge thing because it ties into these other movements politically that we're seeing, like Antifa, which is all based on white guilt, and then BLM and all this stuff. It's like they're literally trying to overthrow the economic system itself, not just the country.
When you boil down the critical race theory, the gender Borg craziness, all of this stuff that we all have a problem with as relatively sane Americans, it's neo-communism, it's neo-Marxism. It's just now it's got a new wrapper. They're going after the gender sexuality angle and the race angle because that's what will work in an American context, or it's what has been working in an American context.
Brent's right. And because the workers of the world mentality thing lost. But look at what happens on social media now, where on the left, it's very common for you to call out your parents for not being woke. That's literally what they used to do in the Soviet Union. You'd have to call out your parent and rat out your parents and rat out your family members. That is 100% what is happening in some parts of the left. And ultimately, when you descend into that kind of madness and chaos, it's only authoritarianism, left-wing authoritarianism, that can save the day. Yeah. I think that, and look at what Brent mentioned that he was an anti-Bush person, as I was in the 2000s, and I was a teenager. But look at what, as a former leftist, what I was against. The idea that the FBI is working with a private company to make sure certain people can't speak is something that you would be horrified that George W. Bush was doing. And now it's like, what do you mean? Like, of course that was happening. Why make a big deal out of it? Like, the smoking gun's not even worth talking about.
It's a nothing burger, Ryan. What are you saying?
The left has lost every one of their cornerstone of what they stood for 25 years ago.
They're not leftists.
Yeah, they used to be the anti-big pharma side as well too. Like, down with GMOs and all this other stuff. And all of a sudden it was, take the shot or lose your job. Take the shot or you're segregated. Like, it's what the hell? It
the Democrats of like, and I wouldn't say progressive, but the leftists that I knew in the early 2000s were genuine leftists.
Right.
And they were
Liberals.
against big corporations and against the big wars. And all of those people, I do not know how they live with themselves today.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, because they don't have any of the same values anymore whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, we've gone, completely. It's like they aren't even leftists. I think of them almost as just a sort of like hybrid organism, like that's a super organism that's made up of a bunch of different people that are just like a hive unto itself, and they use leftist trappings and classical leftist rhetoric, but they're not actually leftists, and they don't do the things they claim to do. What they do a lot is lie all the time, and often, as we said earlier, 180 degrees in the opposite direction of the truth. And that is, that's why I think of them more as like liars and lie people than I do leftists or liberals, because I'm on this whole train of trying to use language much more accurately and to edit out all of the propagandistic semantic games that have been hoisted upon us as a people over the last 20 years. So this is kind of what I'm seeing them as. I don't really see them as leftists. They wear those trappings, but they aren't that. They're just power
you just said with hive, because it is a hive mind mentality, and basically They are just an extension of the Democratic Party, whatever they stand for at that moment. I listened to your one podcast. You said about you had the drag queen on, and you said basically every kind of major drag show thing is
Katie Demure.
Yeah, it's just an extension of the RuPaul Drag Race franchise.
Yeah,
that is the same thing with the Democratic Party. It's just an extension of what the popular talking point belief is now at the time, and what the party is best interest of the party. Not what's best interest of the working class, certainly, and any other group. And you can tell by their true disdain for white poor people in this country, for white people. They have genuine disdain, genuine hatred for them. And some of them openly say, I can't wait till you're all dead. So, it's just where they have fallen to.
This goes back to, I wanted to go back to the contrast between the 1776 project and the 1619 project. And I think a lot of that really does get to the core of what's happening in this country right now. And what's happening is there is a war, an intellectual information war. It's a battle over the narrative of the country itself and how we should look at ourselves and look at our history.
And therefore how we move in the future.
From their side, that lefty radical side, it's like, not only should you not love America, you're not even allowed to like America.
Right.
Even just a little bit. You're not allowed to like it. It's like we want to tear the whole system down and replace it with something else completely. And, the conservatives, obviously, their whole point is like we want to conserve certain values. It doesn't have to be everything, depending on how extreme you are on the conservative side. But
they were just allowed to run amok. It would be Wakanda forever if it was just this female woman.
What's crazy is Wakanda is actually a more conservative society. Like if you look at Black Panther, the lefty side was Killmonger, was the villain, and he's the lefty side. He's like, no, we gotta open these borders up and give all the weapons to the blacks across the world and have them get revenge against the whites.
Black Panther was secretly based.
Whereas Black Panther himself is actually, he was more like conservative, closed borders, a more unified nationalist kind of society where
focus on our people.
Yeah, not interventionalism, stick to ourselves, focus on our own people. Like Wakanda,
I didn't see it, but I believe you. But
watch
their genuine belief is, we won't be Detroit, we won't be that city, and we won't be Jackson, Mississippi, which has no running water. We won't be Flint. We'll be Wakanda if only we have our opportunity. But every time we seem to have their opportunity, you end up with Baltimore, not with not with this future city that's amazing.
I find it so ironic because it almost tells me they didn't really understand too much the message of that movie. Because, like I said, Wakanda is a very conservative society.
But it's their idea of where their identity politics will ultimately lead to is it's not the ideas, it's just the people. So, we get rid of these white people and we will be, remember, this is also, this is not the first time this has happened. You saw the rise of when Hugo Chavez rose in Venezuela, What did he run on? He wrote on, they don't like you because I don't like me because I look like you. I have a big nose and curly hair. When in Central Africa, I think it was, when they sat there and said, let's get rid of all the white farmers so we can be prosperous, and then they starved to death afterwards. They starved afterwards. I mean, there's this identity race-based politics which has worked. It has happened. You had it in Indonesia where there was anti-Chinese sentiment. In Germany with the Jews, you've had it with you've had it with tons of people across time. It's not unique, and it's happening really in America. And where does that ultimate point lead to? It's not going to end at let's do soft segregation with BIPOC only after school programs. It will not end with let's have Joe Biden give out farm subsidies to minorities first, or you can only get medical vaccinations if you're a minority or a woman or whatever. It's going to end in a very, very dark place, the current trajectory it's going on. And so it is important to sit there and to intercede and to get ahead of that and to stop that and to sit there and say, there is nothing wrong with American history. There are bad points, but that is human. There is, I actually say we should learn much more about, global history than we currently do, because everything is kind of Western themed. So you kind of think, oh, everything bad just happened in Europe. And when in fact, everything bad was happening everywhere, kind of always.
Yeah.
In fact, we're living at the time where like there's as little as bad that has ever happened ever. And we just don't really get to appreciate that because the media just sort of bombards us with like.
Did you see White Lotus?
No, I haven't.
I saw season 1.
All right, well, season 2, they make a reference like where the guy says to the girl, if you think everything's bad now, you should have been in Europe for like the last 500 years. Like something like that. Something like that. Basically. Yeah. He's like, it's amazing there's even people left on this continent. We spent
Woo.
Yeah.
Well, that's that's kind of a whirlwind. Do you have anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I mean, I guess
I thought this was a little funny point to bring up along the same line. Fresh release from Stanford is that the word American is quote harmful language.
Goes back to what I was saying. Like, you're not even allowed to like.
Stop
America.
telling me how to talk.
Like, you're not even allowed to like it. And I guess that is very much what you're trying to do with the 1776 Project PAC. Is like you're trying to restore American values.
Well, I'm having like, well, the thing about all these, there are a handful of woke teachers. I like what Libs of TikTok does, but the problem oftentimes is not the teacher. The problem is the administrator, and it's the superintendents and the people coming out of the teaching colleges that are the ones who are demanding that they do these, professional counseling. These people who are diversity officers and their job is to find racism everywhere.
We got to get rid of all that. All these DEI commissars, all these departments of inclusion and equity.
The school board's in charge of the budget, so we take over the school boards. We can affect the budget and abolish DEI policies, and some school boards have done that, and some school boards we've helped flip have passed parents' bills of rights and have said that you cannot do medical procedures or suggest medical procedures to my child. You cannot sit there and talk to gender my child. You can't.
Yes.
You have to do like at the end of the day, the parent does have the most control. It is their child.
Yeah.
And it's always these childless people who are running amok saying there and saying, no, we'll be better parents than you will.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see, how this gender thing falls out.
We already 102 elections we flipped this last year. I'm hoping that we'll do another 100 next year in 2023. It's an important year. So
I think you will. I think as these conversations continue to happen, I mean, there are people that have no clue what's been going on. There are people like you mentioned Loudoun County. There are people who have no idea that a boy who wore a kilt and maybe identified as trans sexually assaulted not one but 2 girls there in the girls' restrooms.
They lied about it and they try to silence the parents. Yeah,
yes.
But the thing is that because COVID happened and everyone was at home, everyone is kind of aware now. That is why it became such a story. I have family and friends who are in fairly conservative areas, and they're like, how do I have 4 trans kids in my kid's class? Like, how is this? How all of a sudden is everyone trans? Why are there
not a social contagion, Ryan?
Why are there no lesbians left?
Right.
Like, why is there's not a single lesbian left? They're not. They're all boys in the end. So I think that all these things are happening. I think people are more aware than ever, and that's why we've been successful even in blue areas. So hopefully we'll be successful going forward.
Yeah, I think the gender ideology stuff is something that the conservatives really do need to keep hitting on, because
it's a winning issue.
It's a winning issue. You know, you can unify a lot of people,
especially in the schools.
What I don't understand is part of being a lesbian or being gay means that you are attracted to someone of the same gender. Yeah. So if gender doesn't exist, that means all the progress you've made on being gay or a lesbian should not exist either.
Yeah.
It seems like if social conservatives did this in the 60s, there would be no gay marriage because they'd say no gender exists then.
Right. Right.
It makes no sense to me if that's your identifiable thing. The problem is that, you know, a big problem is that the gay rights, you know, nonprofits won basically with gay marriage. That was their issue. Yes. They won, but there's still money to be had.
Lots of money. So
you have to find a new thing, and your new thing is you're going to sit there and destroy a child's body in the name of all things that are good. It's literally barbaric.
Yeah, it's evil. I just
it's what Camille Paglia said happens at the end of civilizations.
It certainly feels like we're heading in that direction.
That's why we gotta speak out. That's why we gotta flip, you know, school boards and get, you know, much more rational people in there. And
we certainly have to try something, because if we keep heading in the direction that we're heading, like, we're gonna find society is going to continue to disintegrate, and you know, all this progress that we've made is going to be undone, and we're going to go backward. And there's more backlash too happening against people who are gay, lesbian, bi, and all this stuff. And it's hard to even blame these people, because when you look at the stuff that's being attached to us and being pushed in schools, and the amount of kids who are being harmed by this stuff,
it's friendly drag shows.
Of course, you know, they're going to lump us all together and just be like, look, the slippery slope, we were right. And it's like, how do you even blame them at that point when it's gotten bad, you know?
All right. Well, do you want to wrap up there?
Yeah, I guess we can end it there.
Your website is...
just go to the 1776 Project PAC. PAC is spelled PAC.com if you want to get involved, if you want to run for school board, or if you want to donate, or whatever the case may be. Check it out.
And you're Ryan Girdusky on Twitter, so everyone go follow Ryan on Twitter.
Someone made a fake Instagram of me, so if you got a message,
I saw
cryptocurrency. I am not. I don't know what crypto is. I don't live in Florida.
I saw that. I went and looked you up today to follow you on Instagram, and I saw that there were two, and I'm like, they look the same.
Please report the other one, because I don't. Yeah, I just want my Tesla stock to stop going down. If that could happen, I am all about that. But
oh man, Ryan, seems like they're doing a coordinated attack on Elon.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ryan. We appreciate your time and, you know, the work that you're doing. We think it's awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Everyone else, thank you for watching. We wish you a happy new year. Thanks for supporting the show this year. And we already got a couple guests lined up for next month. One of them is an FBI whistleblower, so stay tuned for that. That's going to be a really good episode. Please support the show, like, comment, subscribe, share if you dare, and donate if you want to help us keep doing this. And take care.
Bye-bye.